Hello, welcome to this edition of the umgoblue.com podcast. This is Phil Callahan along with,
Clint Derringer.
and we're going to talk about the Michigan Wolverines as they head into their game with Wisconsin after the bye week.
I am not Biff. I have sleeves. And I don't, that's by demand.
Appreciate everyone coming.
I got no superheroes for you. We should have a superhero of the week, though, from now on.
Well, Clint, after having time to contemplate without an active game, what are your thoughts on how the team is doing?
Well, right now, the season is kind of shaping up about as I had predicted. I thought they'd struggle early season against Oklahoma, with that being a really tough first road game. And they've won the other games about how we thought. The only one that was a surprise to me was putting up 63 points against Central Michigan. Everything else feels like it's going about how we thought that it would. It's a solid defense. I think they've underwhelmed a little bit on the defensive side. I was hoping that they would be absolutely dominant all of the time, and I don't think that we've really seen that yet. But the offense has certainly been improved over last year, and the long-term future with Bryce Underwood is really absolutely amazing. I had really high hopes for what he would be capable of, and he has surpassed that, especially in terms of poise and execution. And really, I've said this before, but I think it's the most important thing for Bryce is that I don't see him making the same mistake twice. Like there are mistakes, as they would be with any freshman, with any college player, but he continues to just keep stacking up good days and getting better over time. And that is fine for the program, of course, but I think by the end of this season, the offense is going to be a couple steps better than what they started out. And we know what the defense is capable of. I think they will also improve a little bit as they get some leadership back with Rod Moore, and you still have the best kicker in the country, and hopefully they can figure out some other issues in the special teams and field position game. And who knows? They may be playing for a berth in the Big Ten championship game or a playoff spot if they can get to November and take care of business here in October. Everything's still on the table for this Michigan team in 2025.
Well, Coach Moore agrees with you in your evaluation of Bryce.
He is mature beyond his years, so his ability to do that, but this also coaching, and Chip Lindsey doing a great job with teaching him what he needs to do, how he needs to do it. Bryce is really taking ownership of what he needs to do, and also for the staff on how we've created the game plans and what we're doing to allow him to see that. So all of it takes a team, and he's done a really good job of it. And Bryce just keeps getting better and better as the week goes, and we'll see what we can, how much better we can get this week. And
what I'm excited about, and again, we'll talk about Bryce. Everybody's talking about Bryce. It's interesting because in every player availability, in every media availability with coaches, Bryce is one of the topics that everyone wants to talk about. And not that it's not deserved, but definitely I think when you look back at where this team was last season, struggling mightily at the quarterback position, it is just a night and day difference. And, we've talked about this in the podcast. The coaches are talking about it. And we talk about how we had such high expectations for the defense this season and that they still need to get there. All right. They're still trying to achieve that. But when I look at my expectations for the offense moving forward, it's sky high, right? I mean, and there's definitely things that they need to work on, but as long as Bryce stays healthy we only see him increasing experience to match his athletic ability and just waiting like a rocket ship about to take off, right? Just there's, you can just see it just ready to go. So the thing that I think that's going to help that, and one of the things that I have mixed emotions because in the bye week we learned that Coach Moore, prior to his suspension, spent some extra time with the offensive line, and he talked about what he sees in that group right now.
Get back to the fundamentals. Get back to the little things, and play with that nastiness, that physical mentality that Michigan Standard is what it's about. Uh, don't don't worry about the play. And again, it's the how. It's the violence of the play. It's the low pads. It's tight hands. It's feet. Continually moving. Those are the things that really win blocks. It's not the scheme, because at the end of the day, it's one-on-one blocks for a line, whether you get to the first level or the second level. So those are the things that we really harped on is that mentality, the mental piece of it.
So the good news is the O line seems to be coming together. And again, that was one of my criticisms when we were talking in the podcast, and all last season. So, as a former offensive line coach, I expected the offensive line to be the showpiece of this offense, right? You expect the head coach with that experience to make sure that that group is achieving at a high level. Last season, we did not see that. There were lots of reasons for that. The cupboard was bare after having some top NFL talent leave and some players leave the program. This year, you can kind of see it coming together, and I think if there's anything that maybe the average fan may not be paying attention to, because again, it's undeniable when you see Bryce, right? Everybody can see that. But I think the thing that I'm most excited about is how the offensive line seems to be coming together. And even with the loss of Gio Alhade, who's injured, and Coach Moore said will definitely get his position back when he's healthy, but you can see the offensive line coming together and starting to be reminiscent of the great offensive lines that Michigan's had for most of the last 3 or 4 years.
There is some of it is the what, but we always talk about it's the how. It's how you do it, because you can miss your hands and run your feet as fast as you can, be lower than the guy, and want it more than him, and make the block. So it's about the how, especially O line. It's a mentality, and you can feel the physicality breeding back and that mentality breeding back into those guys. And part of that is confidence. So they got to have confidence. And when you do it together in a great atmosphere like they did last game and have that success, it usually carries over. So I just want to keep that going as we go into this week.
Yeah, I am really surprised that we're seeing this improvement after a couple of those injuries, especially. And I think it boils down to really the guy in the very middle there, the center, Greg Crippen, and he is just taking leaps ahead of where he was certainly last year. What we saw was somebody who was a really, really smart player, has been in the program for the full 5 years, gets the calls right, knows his job, but physically sometimes didn't seem like he was capable of executing the blocks that he needed. And when he got against uh, the best defenses on the schedule, he couldn't hold up against those bigger, stronger defensive linemen. And this year, I give a lot of credit not only to Grant Newsome and Sharon Moore for getting in there and helping out a little bit, but also to Chip Kelly, because they're using the center more, using his quickness more than having him try to execute schemes that have him trying to just drive and be like a road grader against guys that he's physically not capable of doing that. That they're running more plays that get him on the move and blocking other guys in space, which is something that he is better at than he is, trying to create knockback in the trenches right off the snap of the ball. So kudos to the scheme to the game planning of the offensive staff and teaching the skills and the blocking assignments that go with some of these different plays. And we're seeing those offensive linemen get to that second level and get blocks on linebackers, and it's paying off. It seems like at least once a game there's an explosive run play where Justice Haynes is taking it to the house. So um, really surprising that the line stepped forward in the face of all of those injuries. But man, it really shows, just like the ceiling in the long term is really, really high for Bryce Underwood. I think the same for the offensive line. Crippen right now is an older guy. El Hadi, all the rest of these guys are really young, and it really could be something special brewing over the next couple seasons.
It's interesting because after the New Mexico game, Crippen talked about his goals for the offensive line.
It doesn't matter who the quarterback is, but I mean, we have high expectations for ourselves. I know for me, like, I want to be the best center in the country, and obviously I wasn't named as one of the Remington watch list guys, but that just fires me up. I mean, I'm just ready to have a great season. Just like I know we all are really excited, as a whole line. Like, obviously, protecting Bryce is a very important thing, but you know that's the standard in our room, and that's what we're gonna do.
And I have to be honest, I wasn't sure if he was going to be a part of the long-term plan. Okay. Mainly for the reasons that you had said, that, the center position is so important. And what Grant Newsome and Sharon Moore have been able to do is to find the right fit. Like you said, he's not going to be a road grader right now. Okay. He's not going to just blow people off the ball, but using technique. And, we used to say this, when you're working with offensive line at any level, right? You have distinct advantages. You know how the play is going to go down, where you're going to attack, and when it's going to happen with the count, right? The offensive line has a distinct advantage over the defensive line, right? And if you're overpowering and you add those things to it, you are dominant, right? It really seems that what we're seeing with Crippen is playing smarter, not necessarily dominant. Okay. Like, again, using all these things, we're going to get a fit like this. We're going to get you help on some plays. We're going to have you attacking at the next level. We're going to have you sliding off guys. And it's been really successful. And again, hats off to whatever Grant Newsome and Sharon Moore have done the last several weeks. But they have really solidified that center position. And you can see, even with the absence of Gio El-Hadi, the other positions are coming along. And like you said, it's not just good for this season. In the past, and I would say 2 years ago in the national championship season, the offensive line would say, we have 8 or 9 guys we can plug in, right? And they did. Right? I mean, we look back to when Zach Zinner got hurt, and they just plugged another guy in and just kept going. And it was amazing, right? And then you had those guys leave, and as we said last season, you had a little dip. But it really is looking, when you see the players on the field and you see the depth fighting for playing time and the players coming in, you can see another surge coming at the offensive line. And again, it's great to see. And, one of the things that you and I talked about when Bryce Underwood was coming in is last year, if you're a top quarterback prospect and you looked at how the offensive line played last year and how many quarterbacks were knocked off the field, you'd kind of have to question that. And, of course, there were many reasons that Bryce decided to come to the University of Michigan. Besides being the greatest university on the planet and him being a local guy, the NIL helped, but he had to have some faith in Sharon Moore and Grant Newsome being able to shore up that offensive line, and we're seeing that happen so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's still some room to grow. Again, this season, there's some young, talented wide receivers that are going to start getting an opportunity here to push for playing time. Because still nobody has really separated themselves in terms of making an impact in the game. I think Donovan McCulley has shown flashes physically that he's a difference maker, but defenses certainly can dedicate more resources, can roll coverage toward McCulley, because I don't think that there's anybody else in that wide receiver room that right now is striking fear into the defense, making them pay for rolling over and kind of shadowing Donovan McCulley with a safety. And that is really the next step for this team in this season on offense is those wide receivers and the tight ends in the passing game have got to start making some plays and showing that they can beat coverage when it's just one-on-one, whether it's man to man straight up, you got to win that route, or if it's zone coverage but the coverage is kind of rolled away from you, you got to be able to find where those gaps are and get there and make plays and catch the ball. And Samaj Morgan's a guy that we've seen do it as a freshman for sure 2 years ago. He needs to step up. He needs to take that step forward and be a playmaker. Or there are some younger guys who are also talented on this team and in the receiver room that I would expect now that we're past the bye week, now that we're 5 and almost 6 weeks into the season. Those guys are they're not true freshmen anymore, right? They are going to be pushing for playing time, and I'm sure the coaches understand that is the next big jump that has to happen for this team. Is they got to get guys that can get some separation in the passing game and guys that can make their quarterback look good, so that Bryce, is not putting balls on the money in the end zone like we saw in the Nebraska game and the ball's dropped. We just got to find the guy who's going to be able to make that big play in the big moment. And maybe it's the guys that are there right now, but they're going to have to elevate their game. It's what we've seen to this point from the pass catchers, both tight ends and wide receivers, is not good enough to beat the best teams on the schedule.
Well, Clint, you went right into the area that I was going to say was, let's be honest, disappointing so far into this season. And Sharon Moore went on kind of a little rant about how to coach receivers to catch the ball.
It's all where your eyes are when you catch the football. Seeing the ball all the way to the tuck versus having your eyes look, trying to make a move before you catch the football. That's mainly where all the drops came from. And so continue to work on that. Those kids have done a really good job. They did a really good job in the bye week, and it'll just continue to be a focus as we go through the week. And you watch college football, all the drops are usually that. It's not something special. There's no magic potion for it. And the worst coaching point you can tell a kid is catch the ball. He knows he's supposed to catch the ball. Catch the ball. It irks me when I hear that. You got to catch the ball. Well, duh. You think he wants to drop the ball? No, he doesn't. So you got to tell him how to catch it. And there's different ways to do that, whether that's above your chest, thumb to thumb, below your navel, pinky to pinky, see the ball all the way to the tuck. So all those things are pieces of it that you have to coach and teach, and those guys have done a really good job this week.
You can hear his frustration boiling over, right? Mm-hmm. Because, again, and listen, you see Donovan McCulley, he is a physical specimen, okay? He is reminiscent of great Michigan wideouts who you just expect to dominate with their physicality, right? And you look at the stats, and he has 13 receptions in 4 games. He's averaging 3 catches a game. And he's far and above, Samaj Morgan is next with 11, Marlon Klein with 9, and of course he missed a game. So, when I look at, we do a lot of comparison, and it was funny because, back when Coach Harbaugh was here, he never liked to compare things. Well, we love to compare things because that's what we do, right? And when I look at this, it's, boy, you could tell me that these were the receiver stats from last year. That's how bleak they are. And, there's a lot of receptions spread out among a lot of players. Okay. But there's nobody really seizing the opportunity. And, you have Coach Castela talking today saying, we have more depth in the tight end position than we had last year, even though you had Colston Loveland, who was a generational player, right? But we're not seeing it. And it's concerning and it's disappointing. I think the person I'm most disappointed with is Samaj right now. And, I really like Samaj Morgan, and I've, for sure the season's not over. The book is not written, but so far, as you said, there are opportunities for players to step up, right? There's an opportunity for Channing Goodwin. There's an opportunity for Kendrick Bell. And, it's interesting because, we talk a lot about when you see players on the field, they must be performing in practice, okay, or they wouldn't be out there. And it was interesting because that's one of the things that Wink Martindale talked about today.
I think that when you move people around, we said it before about getting the best 11 on the field, that facts are facts. And you're just honest with everybody. And if you want to play more, practice better.
We can only assume that, the players we're seeing are playing well in practice, but it's baffling because you see the drops, and yes, Bryce Underwood has a gun, and yes, he might be, maybe he should ease up on those passes a little bit. But you know what, Clint, from grade school, junior high, high school up, when it hits you in the hands, you got to catch the damn ball. Okay. And it's frustrating to see opportunities missed because our wide receivers just aren't getting the job done. And again, I think if there's any area of concern, we talk about, warning lights on the dashboard. There are all kinds of warning lights in the gauge for the wide receivers. And what that means is there's opportunities for people. And, I'm wondering, we have seen in the past, and I think, most obviously Mikey Sainristil, who was moved from wide receiver over to the defensive side of the ball. At this point, I'm wondering if there's anybody on defense who wants to come over and play wide receiver, because that's how lean things look at the wide receiver position right now.
I have significant optimism for Andrew Marsh. I think that he is going to jump up and make an impact this season. Again, I think it's a question of when. With freshman receivers, so much of it is understanding the whole scheme of the passing game and how the plays work together. Especially when you start getting into option routes and understanding coverage, right? It's so much harder. The leap from high school to college is pretty big in terms of having to have a real football IQ. Probably only surpassed by offensive line. A quarterback, of course, but the wide receivers, the difference in high school, because they're such great athletes, nobody can cover them. Just go. Just get as far down the field as possible, and the quarterback's going to chuck it, and you're going to go up and make a play. It's so hyper simplified in high school for these guys many times that once you get to big boy football in college, and you've got to be able to think and read and react and keep your feet moving at full speed at the same time, you're making connections in your brain that didn't exist before. Where they didn't have to think about these things as high school players. So it takes time to get into, a player's full potential. But usually by the end of the freshman season, I would say we see that. So I think Andrew Marsh is going to settle into that. He's probably not ready these next couple weeks, but he could surprise us. He could jump up and start getting more of the targets here, depending on how they're working on him developing those skills. So we'll see. Fred Moore's got some experience in the offense. Um, I'm not sure why he got passed, but there's an opportunity for him back and take his spot back for sure, because the guys that are in front of him are not exactly lighting it on fire. So um, if he can figure out what it was where he was falling short, he can make those changes. Um, I think what Chip Lindsey is looking for is to be able to take big chunks out of the defense, maybe once per quarter. Every other series, he'd like to see a wide receiver step up and make a big play just to make the defense honor that down the field passing game, that vertical passing game. These guys don't have to be Randy Moss, but they do have to seize the opportunities that are there and what the defense is giving them. So first guy to do that is going to get a lot of targets, because defenses are clearly keying on Donovan McCulley. Somebody has to step up and be the next guy that makes those defenses pay.
No doubt. Now, switching to the defensive side of the ball, one of the things I was really happy to see was the return of Rod Moore. And, we've been waiting for him to return, and, has had a number of, had an injury, had a surgery, had to have another surgery. And I was really concerned if he was going to make it back. Great to see him on the field, and also great to hear him talk about, his journey and why he came back.
It's a lot. For one, I love the game of football, so I just wanted to come back and play football again. But just getting raised in the household that I was raised in, my mom and dad, of not quitting and just keep pushing forward, and um, just doing everything for my parents. Like, they sent me here to come get an education and be successful, and that's what I always leaned on. And then, like, my grandma, who passed unfortunately a couple years back, like, I always told her that I would go to the NFL. So that was really just like my why. And one of my friends that passed as well, we've always had a talk, like, being successful in sports.
So again, it's great to hear, to see him back on the field, and um, he said himself he's not, 100%. He's probably 99%. Still getting back game reflexes, but really heartening to see him back on the field. And I think the impact that he can have on a defense that is already shows the signs of being another dominant group. And it was interesting because you know Derek Moore was talking this week about his expectations for the defense.
The next couple games, we expected to turn it up a little bit more, things like that, because I feel like a lot of people out there kind of like sleeping on us as a unit, but it's going to show eventually.
Last one, please.
Who's sleeping on you?
I'm not going to say too much, but we're just going to leave it as that. When it's time for us to make our name heard, they're going to hear it.
Even after this last week, I mean, you guys had like 9 TFLs and 7 sacks.
Yeah. So that was just a preview. It's going to get better though.
When you look at the stats, and you look across the fandom, there's disappointment that the defense has allowed as many points as they have. There's disappointment. There's disappointment that the Nebraska game was as close as it was, and of course, there was that odd Hail Mary that Coach Moore didn't even want to discuss.
No comment.
How come?
I'll just keep that to myself.
But again, the score was the score. And I think when you look at the pieces of this defense, you can see that it's coming together. And, I think the most impressive thing was just, the move from Barham from linebacker to edge has just been, just devastating to opposing offenses. What are your thoughts on the defense so far this season?
Well, I think they're underperforming. I think they're good. I think they're solid. SP Plus right now has them eighth in the country. I think that's still overrated compared to what we've seen, but they started at like number 3 or number 4 and they've slid to 8. And that's a sign in SP Plus that you're underperforming your expectations. And I'm looking at the games right now, and you know, SP Plus predicted Michigan to give up 6 points to New Mexico, and they ended up giving up 17. Expected to give up 26 to Oklahoma. They gave up 24. That was about right. Expected 7 to Central, gave up 3. Great job. And then expected to give up 23 to Nebraska and gave up 27. So it's a little bit dicey. And again, just from the math standpoint, they're underperforming expectations. But when you and I are sitting there, a really great defense is they're absolute killers on third down, especially on passing downs, on third and long. And maybe Michigan's got that now that Barham has moved out to the edge, and you've got a legitimate, a player who strikes fear into the offense on those third and long situations. But early on in the season, they're just still giving up so many third down conversions, and there are plays to be made. I remember distinctly at least 4 times that there's been an unblocked blitzer free to the quarterback and just has not made the play on a sack. And I know I mentioned it specifically in the Oklahoma game. There was a sequence where an unblocked guy comes in, doesn't sack John Mateer, and then the very next play is the corner. I think it was Jair Hill gets his hands on the ball but doesn't get the interception, and then they give up a third down conversion and eventually a touchdown on that drive. It's just that they're this close. They're just a hair away from really, really being the dominant defense that this team needs. Again, we've said since the very beginning of the season, the road is going to have to be paved by the defense. They are going to have to be dominant and to give a lot of runway for the young offensive players to start coming together. And we've seen positive movement on the offensive side of the ball. We've seen them getting better on the offensive line and at quarterback. The running backs are really good, and the wide receivers are underwhelming. But the defense has got to be absolutely dominant through the middle portion of this season to let the offense continue to grow, right? And that is really what's going to make a difference here over the next probably 4 or 5 games. Wisconsin, USC, Washington, Michigan State. All of those teams are right in that like 60th to 30th in SP Plus. So Michigan should be able to dominate those games on defense if they can execute and make the plays that are there on third down.
Well, and I think the defense realizes that they need to step up. Etta said this.
We had a plan of what we were going to do. Like, we had a plan of us, like, we sat down as a defense, like, sometimes without the coaches, like, the captains talking, like, we have a plan of what we're going to do before every game. So it's like, there's no reason for us to be surprised because, like, we demanded greatness from each other, and, like, we're going to keep raising that bar every game. Like, it can never be the best. Like, we're going to keep going. So, like, it's great to see it, but it's like, okay, how can we take that next step? And guys like Ern and D. Moore and Rayshawn, like, they really instill that to us, like, no complacency at all. So, we're going to continue to keep taking those steps. But it should be no surprise because that's the standard we set since spring, and we're going to continue to do that.
It's one thing to talk about it, but you got to do it. And, there's a name that I'm loath to bring up because I think that it's mentioned too much without nuance among the fandom, right? And that's Coach Don Brown, right? The Michigan defense prior to the great run that resulted in, college football playoff berths and the national championship. And the reason I mentioned the name Clint is exactly the point you make, right? The Don Brown defense was, we're going to blitz from all over, right? And I remember there was a quote where he said, it's a lot more complicated than you think. And I remember kind of looking at him thinking, it's football. We're not splitting the atom here. There are only so many places you can blitz from, right? And what happened in that version of the Michigan defense is when Michigan went against teams with equal or superior talent, they were able to counter those blitzes, right? And the thing that frustrates me about what you said that I have to acknowledge is that you have blitzers coming and just missing. It's uncontrolled blitzing, right? And it's almost like they're coming so hard and so fast that opposing quarterbacks step up and avoid it. And I don't like to see that. I don't like to see it because it's frustrating, because it could be a monster, huge play for the Michigan defense. And it's a huge momentum swing when the quarterback can step away from it. And it's one of the things that I'm concerned about with Barham right now. Okay. As amazing as he is, and, you have Wink going on and on about him.
Neither Matt or myself are going to draft anybody. So, I don't, it's real easy to just throw out a top 10 pick because you don't know the rest of the country and who's coming out and everything else. I just know he's a good football player. I don't think that he has a ceiling. I think he's just going to keep getting better. And I know he loves playing in this defense.
You have Sharon going on and on about him.
Yeah, he's a freak. It's a problem for other people. I'm glad it's not our problem. He's got ability, but now he's playing to that ability and he's doing it consistently. But you saw it really in spring, but then you saw it in training camp how he practiced. Because he always had the talent. But we've been around guys with talent that don't ever push it to that level, and he's pushed it to that level, and now you're seeing it. And he's got the chance to be a first-round draft pick if he continues to play that way. And we'll continue to push him, and he continues to push himself. But it's fun to watch him out there on the edge, man.
He is a beast, okay? He's only coming from one side, right? And football is move and counter move. Okay, you're going to roll away from him. So what are you going to do when you roll away from him? Or can he break through with enough control that he can still make that play, right? So when I look at the defense, you can't look at Barham as the shiny gimmick that's going to fix everything, right? You can't do that. And, we do have injuries. Zeke Berry is out. And you look and, you have TJ Guy, who's not playing as much because Barham is taking his reps. So you really look at the defense and it's almost like there's 14 or 15 pieces and they have to find out which 11 can be the most ideal, right? And one of the things that, Wink talked about today was...
Yeah, I think that's all part of, trying to get the best 11 out there consistently. And, like I said, Rayshon Benny said in one of the first meetings we had in training camp, he said, the same 11. We want it to look like the same 11. So whoever your starters are, the next 11, you want it to look the same. And I thought that was a great goal for, a kid, or I shouldn't say kid, a grown man at his age, to say that. And we're not there yet, but we're practicing to get that way. And that's why you're seeing different guys on the field.
As much as, we'll go on and on about how great this defense could be, like you said, they're giving up opportunities and they need to step up. So I have questions on the defense. And again, I think it's a question of what are you going to do, right? Which 11 are going to be your top guys, or which 11 are you going to have on the field together that are going to gel together? And I don't want to see the defense rely on any single player, as great as Barham is, right? I don't want that to be kind of the shiny bauble that Wink gets enamored with. And, he'll blow up. Again, they had 7 sacks, right, in the last game. They had 7 sacks and the game was still close, right? I'm not interested in 7 sacks. I'm interested I said at the beginning of this year, I didn't think that this defense should give up double digits to anyone, and they've done that, right? So, it's interesting because, Wink talked about today that,
Well, sure, because we won. I mean, and then the bottom line at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to is winning and losing. But yeah, I thought that we played really. I thought we played very well. I thought that we showed some toughness and tenacity and getting after the quarterback the way we did in Nebraska. But like I said, that's over with, and we just got to get better every day. Continue to get better every day.
and yeah, it's all about winning and losing, but it's also about that while this offense figures out the wide receiver position and figures out exactly how much they're going to let Bryce run, the defense needs to step up and be the thing. And it has the potential, but it's not all there yet.
Yeah, I think that's right. A couple things, Sharon didn't want to talk about the Hail Mary and the whole sequence leading up there. He didn't want to. He didn't want to pile on Biff. I'm sure that they had a conversation or two about it directly. But defensively, I would summarize it to say that one of the guys that was back in the end zone was TJ Guy. So that means that the defensive call on that Hail Mary was one of the calls that drops our defensive end into coverage. And you had TJ Guy sprinting back to the goal line to be a on-the-ball defender in a situation that cornerbacks and wide receivers don't see that type of pass and scenario very frequently. I don't understand, it's a mistake. It's an avoidable mistake even at the coordinator level, so it's happening by the players. It's happening at with the coordinator, but there is a lot of reason still for optimism. Number one, Jayshawn Barham he makes an impact every play that he's on the field. Either he's drawing extra attention and making sure other guys are getting one-on-one matchups up front, or he's beating a blocker and creating havoc. So he is in a spot right now that we are getting maximum impact from Jayshawn Barham. And remember, we were missing Barham for the second half of the first game and the first half of the Oklahoma game. And certainly looking back now, that had even a greater impact than maybe we had mentioned at the time. Also, in our last game against Nebraska, we saw the interior defensive linemen who we were critical of really step forward and have a great game. And specifically, Rayshawn Benny and Trey Pierce just had an absolutely great game from the interior of the defensive line. I think part of that is Barham drawing more attention and those guys getting one-on-one blocks. But it seemed like they flipped a switch, and we saw a different player out of Rayshawn Benny in that Nebraska game, and it's a very welcome sight. Trey Pierce made an amazing play on a fourth down shovel pass to the tight end, and he also made the big play on third down to even force the fourth down on that red zone stop. So that's really great to see. Got to see more of that. Derek Moore also having a great game. His one-on-one win rate on pass rush is still really high on PFF. So all of that is great things and going to continue to get better. The two other things, the depth at linebacker is what allows Barham to go up and play edge. And I am shocked at what we're seeing from Cole Sullivan. Like, he is really, really a dynamic player in space, not only covering and making plays on the ball with a few interceptions and really hard diving catches that we've seen Cole Sullivan make to make interceptions, but also tackling in space coming off of his coverage and making some big tackles on a quarterback. I remember seeing that against Central Michigan. So Cole Sullivan's been another eye-opening, kind of jumps off the screen, and he's a redshirt freshman. He's a young guy. He's going to be around for at least another season and maybe another couple seasons. So just a dynamic player who's probably going to have probably not the same kind of impact as Barham, but will be carrying that kind of weight as a playmaker going forward for this defense.
Clint, I'll tell you, Martindale was raving about Sullivan.
But there's competition across the board, even in the linebacker room. You look at a kid like Cole Sullivan. I mean, how can you not play him the way how productive he is? And but when you go and watch practice tape, he's playing faster than a lot of guys, out there. And he's just going to continue to get better. And that's the fun part about coaching. There's a lot of crappy parts. Like I clean that up? All right, but that's the fun part of coaching is seeing a guy like that.
Yeah, and the last point is there have been some injuries in the secondary. We talked about Rod Moore, Zeke Berry's been down. You're getting true freshmen and redshirt freshmen a ton of playing time back there. So part of not making the play on third down is there are still some really, really young guys, including a couple true freshmen, getting a ton of reps early in the season. And we saw that pay off in that championship run where Michigan would play their youngest guys early in the season and not waiting for the fourth quarter and garbage time. Those meaningful reps in the first quarter, second quarter in close games. And that is going to pay off for them in the long term, where we're going to see this defense for sure making bigger plays and being a tougher defense when we get to games 10, 11, and 12, just like we saw that last year. So lots of reason for optimism. I don't want to sound like just a downer, but if you're asking me to grade this defense compared to my expectations through 4 games, they're underperforming and they need to get it turned around. And we see how that can happen. I think they are putting the pieces into place to make that happen. Now we just have to see the results because Michigan needs that defensive unit to be dominant these next 4 games.
And I think we'd be remiss if we also did not acknowledge that this defensive line and edge is so dominant that the referees are letting the other teams get away with practically tackling murder. Okay. And Sharon was asked about this.
I mean, we're getting tackled. You can say that. Yeah, we are getting tackled a lot. But I think we got away with some holds too. So if they're just not going to call it on both sides, then we're letting us play. That's cool. But if you're going to call one and the other, then that becomes a problem. But if it's, hey, we're going to let you guys hold, we're going to let you guys hold, we're going to let you guys play, okay, cool, let's play. But when it becomes one-sided, then it becomes.
Martindale was so disgusted, he didn't want to talk about it at all.
I'll leave my answer as this. I'm going to be a very good podcast guest when I retire. All right? That's where I'll leave it at.
Wink and I are going to start our own podcast.
There you go.
I think you can imagine how salty he is about how the liberties that other teams are allowed to take with Michigan's defense. So in a weird way, it's a tribute. Okay. But it's also, you don't want to see, that be the difference in a game. And as Coach Moore said, hey, if they're going to call it both ways, okay, well, then it's move and counter move, right? But it's a slippery slope because, I don't know if you coach your guys to start tackling the other team too, because, you don't know when you're going to get a referee or an officiating crew, or the Big Ten is going to decree to a referee crew that suddenly they're going to start calling, change the way they're calling things. So, but it's one of the frustrating things in this season so far is that you look at that and you go, it definitely seems like Michigan is playing under a different set of rules as far as defensive holding goes.
I I'm gonna go on a limb and make a prediction that anything that comes down from the Big Ten office, who manages the officials, or comes down from the NCAA, is more likely to hurt Michigan than it is to help them. So they're better off just figuring out how to make it so clear that the referee has to throw the flag. Other than that, they're just setting themselves up for more problems, even talking about it. And I think that's why you kind of saw Sharon Moore and Wink Martindale kind of muzzling themselves there.
All right. So we've talked about the offense, we've talked about the defense, and now it's time to do a deeper dive into what we think about Bryce. So it's interesting because Coach Moore, will rave and rave about him, right? And everybody seems to rave and rave about him. But one of the things that I thought was interesting was that Coach Kasla was asked, "Hey, has the offense changed, right? Are we suddenly going to see Bryce taking off all the time? Is he going to be running?" And he kind of gave a long rambling answer.
Well, I think it's like anything else, and much has been made about our Oklahoma game and the games thereafter. I think, first of all, we go into every which game aligned and unified about how we see the game, and then not every game's the same, and not every game exactly plays out exactly how you think it's going to. So I don't know that there's been this complete pivot or shift in mindset or mentality, but we do know he's one of our best players, and he's a really good player, and he can get the ball to other really good ones too. So sometimes, like hindsight's 20/20, in terms of how a game went, but this thing's built pretty sturdy here, where we're not going to be overreactive to success or failure just because one game looked like this and we scored X amount of points or had X amount of yards. I don't know that you can turn around and say the next game plan is going to be the exact same.
And what I took from it is, hey, listen, they came into this season knowing that they had an incredible weapon in Bryce, right? But you also have weapons at running back. We need weapons to stand up at wide receiver. So I'm not sure if suddenly, we're going to see Bryce running, 20 or 30 times a game as some people were calling for, right? And it's interesting because when you look at the stats, okay, of course we have Justice Haynes, leading with 537 yards net rushing. Next is Jordan Marshall with 189. Bryce Underwood has 169. He's been running a lot. But when I look at the offense as a whole, it seems to me that his runs stand out mainly because we're not seeing the passing game take off. So when I look at, again, we talk about the numbers a lot, right? I'm expecting to see Bryce run less, believe it or not. And I'm expecting that, the passing game is going to start to take off. So what are your thoughts on that? And, I know we've dove into the defense and kind of dissected it. What do you think of when you look at the offense so far, and what do you expect for the rest of the season?
Well, the key to everything is the relationship and the rhythm that Chip Lindsey and Bryce Underwood can develop together. So Chip Lindsey has to package plays and teach techniques that are both going to attack the defense based on what the defense is trying to do, but also is going to create almost like a curriculum for a teacher teaching a student, right? So it's going to be simple through the first 4 games, for what they're asking Bryce to do in terms of reading a defense in the passing game. And then it's going to get more complicated as he continues to get smarter and make the decisions faster. So, first of all, you get the right decision more frequently, right? You go from 5 out of 10 to 7 out of 10 to 10 out of 10. And then you start working on, okay, make 10 out of 10 good decisions, but make them faster, see them earlier, right? See it before it happens instead of seeing it as it happens. So there's still a really steep development curve for how the quarterback has to develop. And what we've seen after the Oklahoma game is, to me, what I think they told Bryce, based on the way that he changed, was if you don't see it or if you feel something that is off, go ahead and tuck it and run. So they're not necessarily calling direct Bryce Underwood called run plays like when Denard was the quarterback, or like we saw more of even when Devin Gardner was a quarterback. But I think they're giving him a quicker trigger to, okay, look here. If it's open, throw it. If that's not open, check there. If that's not open, go, right? Like, take off with your legs is option 2 or option 3 in the packages that Chip Lindsey is putting together right now. And that's for 2 reasons. Number 1 is the quarterback's mental development, like I just said. But also, number 2, who do you trust to make the play and get a chunk yards? Bryce's legs or your wide receiver's hands? And right now, I would also trust Bryce Underwood's legs to pick up 9 or 10 yards against one defender, as opposed to our number 2 or number 3 wide receiver one-on-one against the defender to get open and catch the ball. So that can change over time as the quarterback can make quicker decisions and you can give him more options and package plays together that give him more options. But also it's incumbent on the other players around him to step up and make bigger plays. I think there's another opportunity really for Marlon Klein to jump back into the spotlight. I think he had 7 catches in the first game, and then has only had 2 catches since and battling some injuries. So Marlon Klein is a guy that I think can also take some of that load off of Donovan McCulley and can step up in this role. And I think that we will see him starting to get work more and more into those, especially against zone coverages and the middle of the field, as coverages start rolling toward McCulley. And that's, again, kind of you hear a tight end called a security blanket for a quarterback. The tight end's going to be somewhere close by, right in the middle of the field, right where you can see him. If you look there, it's not open, hit Marlon in the middle. Like it's the default answer. If you don't know what's going on, find him and hit him. It's a big target. If you can't see what's going on, take off and run. It helps simplify it for the quarterback, and it's been effective. So we'll see how it grows and evolves from here. I think the numbers are more about the wide receivers than they are about the quarterback right now, and I like the way that Bryce is developing. If everybody else raises their game to the same level that he does, then I expect them to keep growing and be good enough to win games if the defense is really starting to dominate through the middle of the season.
Well, and Coach Castle had talked about the problems that having a running quarterback introduce to an opposing defense.
Well, I think when you start, and we've carried quarterback runs in some fashion in every game, but it doesn't necessarily affect our room, but it does change how you look at the run game because it completely changes the numbers. Like there's an old saying, when you run the quarterback, it's like having a 12th guy on the field. You know, there's an extra gap for the defense to fit. There's an extra ball carrier they have to account for. So it can change and alter how the edge of the defenses play. It can change and alter when you're in certain formations, how many people they stand in or out of the box. So I think it's another layer that the defense has to be concerned about in every down. because it's not just a first and second down thing. It's not just a red zone thing. But when you start to run the quarterback, and Coach Lindsey's done that a ton in his past, and then also the quarterback's created some of his own plays with his legs, both still throwing the ball and escaping the pocket to run. Well, that changes the type of coverages you want to play. That changes, you have to have another person account for the quarterback in passing situations.
And I don't, I'm not saying that we're not going to see Bryce run, but I really like the point you make about that, him running is going to be moving down the option tree. And, and in defense of the wide receivers, okay, tight ends were dinged up. I think that in the first couple games, Donovan McCulley was really being held close, kind of filling that tight end spot, right, in the patterns. So I do expect he's going to have opportunities. I'm expecting a lot more, right? I think he really needs to step up. And again, you talked about the opportunity for Andrew Marsh. I would say that after Donovan McCulley, every position is wide open right now. And I'm even saying about Samash. Okay. So lots of opportunities. Next man up. And we will see that. So, all right. Well, we've kind of beaten the current status of the team. How do you see this Wisconsin game shaping up, Clint?
Wisconsin is really on the wrong end of it right now in the Luke Fickell era. They kind of went against the grain, against what their Wisconsin tradition was. They hired an offensive coordinator that was an air raid guy in Phil Longo. That didn't go over well, and now they're switching offensive coordinators this season and had another quarterback go down right away. Billy Edwards tried to play in the last game, but couldn't do it. Maybe he'll be back for this game. Maybe he won't. They really have that feel that the Michigan program had in the middle of the Rodriguez era and toward the end of the Hoke era, where they do some things right, but it never sticks. Like, one thing does not connect to another. Like, all successes are kind of isolated, and it's always something going wrong. If it's not this, it's that. And that's the feeling Luke Fickell's Wisconsin team right now. So I expect Michigan to play well coming out of the bye week. I don't think that Wisconsin's going to play particularly well. I originally thought 31-10. I think Michigan, I bumped my expectations. Michigan up to 34. And, Michigan will probably give up 2 scores. Originally, I thought 10, and now with the defense, but not dominant, I said 14. So I expect Michigan to win something like 34-14. But certainly it's in play that this game could be a laugher if Wisconsin comes out and does not play well, and Michigan really does come out with a lot of energy coming out of the bye week. They could put it on them quick. I would really be surprised if this one is close, and really cannot see Wisconsin coming into the Big House to beat Michigan. So I think either Michigan wins a medium-sized game, somewhere from 17 to 20 points, or that they really put it on them and stretch this out.
I would be surprised if Wisconsin breaks into double digits. I will be disappointed if Michigan scores less than 30. I mean, I'm expecting this to be a blowout. And again, it's going to be a maze out. It's going to be a beautiful day at the Big House. Temperatures are going to be in the 80 degrees, which is absolutely tropical for Michigan in October. And, Clint, the thing that strikes me in this game is we've had such change in the Big Ten over the last 10 or 15 years. And I've been reading a lot about how the Big Ten is on such an amazing arc to dominate all of college football, right? And one of the things that I don't want to say I'm sad, things change, right? I am all about embracing change. I remember 15 or 20 years ago, there were people who did not want to see the big house updated, upgraded at all, didn't want to see private seating, didn't want to see boxes, didn't want to see any change, right? Listen, change is part of life. You need to embrace it. You need to try to guide it, right? But if you were to think back to old school Big Ten, right? Wisconsin was a power. Wisconsin was dominant. And you look as the Big Ten has expanded, Michigan and Ohio State are navigating these new waters, right? You look at Indiana, you look at Illinois, right? If you had told me 15 years ago to pick which one of these schools would be dominant in the year 2025, Illinois, Indiana, or Wisconsin, I would have picked Wisconsin. If you told me now pick the second team, I would have picked Wisconsin again. So it's interesting, and you look back, kind of drawing another tangent, right? Like 20, 30 years ago when Michigan hockey was in the CCHA, Lake Superior State was a power, right? And as hockey evolved, they kind of just fell to the wayside. And I look at Wisconsin and it's kind of the same thing. It's like, I don't know. And again, Michigan struggled in the Rich Rod era, but they came back, right? Now we had to go through the Brady Hoke era to get to the Jim Harbaugh era, but we got there, right? And I look at Wisconsin and kind of falling away. I look at Nebraska. I'm sure when Nebraska joined the Big Ten, they did not expect to be an also-ran. And that's kind of where they are right now. Like, yeah, they played a really tough game, but here's the script for when Nebraska plays really tough games. They play a really tough game and they lose, right? So while financially it may be a windfall because they're part of the larger conference, I can understand Wisconsin fans being a little bit salty at the way things are shaking out. Now, I will make the same point that, 20, 30 years ago when Penn State joined the Big Ten, they kind of meandered for a while. And we can say that they're continuing to meander with Coach Franklin. But at least they're meandering at the top, right? And Wisconsin isn't. So it's interesting as the Big Ten continues to evolve and, continues to add teams and expand from sea to shining sea, right? And just dominate the landscape. New powers are rising, old powers are falling, and hopefully Michigan will continue to be part of the rising tide. But it is interesting to see as things change.
Yeah, I see a lot of comparison or a lot of similarities for me in Barry Alvarez for Wisconsin being similar to Bo Schembechler for Michigan. And then Paul Christ and Brett Bielema, that era of Wisconsin being kind of like the Lloyd Carr era, where by the end of that era, people that in the fan base at Wisconsin were complaining about 9-win seasons, about being underwhelming. And they changed, thinking that they had to change in order to break whatever ceiling they were bumping their heads on. And when you do that, you roll the dice to also erasing your floor. And I think that they're in a little bit of a free fall until they find their floor and figure out what they're going to be as a program to turn it around. So anyway, for this season, they're okay in different spots. I think that the most interesting matchup is Michigan's offense against Wisconsin's defense. Both are ranked right in the mid 30s in SP plus for the unit. So really, if Michigan's offense is moving the ball consistently, picking up first downs and getting a couple more explosive plays, run game or pass game or both, then really that's going to be a dominating performance, because I don't think that Wisconsin's going to score more than 2 or 3 times. I would be really disappointed if Wisconsin gets to 20. So if Michigan's offense is beating Wisconsin's defense, then the score is going to stretch out over time without a doubt.
I am expecting this to be done by halftime. Going to be a noon kick at the big house, the way football was intended. Weather's going to be great. The maize out will be in full effect. And looking for, really hoping that the offense can get on track and use this as an opportunity to get some of those receivers some rhythm. And if that happens, this could be a blowout in the first quarter. So, again, we'll have a lot to talk about. Well, Clint, do you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, throw the ball to the running backs, and let's see Samaj Morgan return a punt for a touchdown so that we can put two things to rest at once. That'd be great.
That would be outstanding. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the UMGoBlue.com podcast. This is Phil Callahan along with
Clint Derringer.
Go Blue.
Go Blue.
You want to be explosive, and like you guys all know, physicality pieces, bread and butter. But I want to make sure that we can impose our will on people, but also get those big plays, because that's how you win ball games, right? And scoring points and possessing the football. So,
Yeah, I think that, you know, the standard that Shrone has established with the team itself, you know, every day you're looking to get better and coach better and play better. And, you know, if it's not there, he lets you know. And, you know, I see us, you know, taking off as far as, you know, ascending. But it's, you know, each game's different. Each team's different, so it's going to be a tough battle.
Thank you for listening to the UMGoBlue.com podcast. All rights reserved.